And we're here with Paul Wolf Christensen, one of my favorite. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
How things been going?
Things have been busy. Things are going pretty darn well, you know. Considering everything we've been through the last 18 months.
It's been a crazy, long 2 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
You know, we would never guess a million years something like this ever happened in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you think about back in the day of the Depression and how they all survived. And we're so technological now, and we do all this technical stuff. And I would have never imagined my lifetime going through something like this.
Well, I know all the musicians, you know, our brothers and sisters, music people, have been were out of work for 18 months, 17, 18 months. And so it was a real adjustment to not work, not to mention the financial end of it, you know. So, but yeah, it's coming back, and hopefully, you know, things are going to turn around, that the new variants aren't going to affect us very much, and we can get ahead of this thing.
Is there anything personally you learned over the pandemic about yourself, being cooped up in a house? Like, you know, some people went crazy being in the house. They wanted to get out of the house and go do things, so they picked up hobbies.
Yeah, you know what? I used it as precious time to work in my studio. My studio is my sanctuary.
That's awesome.
And I got a lot of work done. I wasn't bored for even a minute. I got to exercise a little, I got to cook, I got to work around the house, I got to garden, I finished one album, I'm halfway through a second album, so it's been a prolific time.
You know, they said a lot of couples, a lot of married couples, and that during the pandemic, there was a lot of tension. Like, you're still breathing, you're still here?
Yeah.
Was there a lot of that with you and your wife, or?
Yeah, she worked from home, so it was a pretty good, you know, actually we had a lot of fun. You get to know each other. When she's gone all the time, I'm gone all the time. We had a lot of really good time together and a lot of laughs. And we kind of enjoyed the time together. Mm-hmm.
You know, it definitely taught us a valuable lesson, how precious life really is and the things that we do and how important they are. So as we get started with this interview, I'm going to start off with the same question I do with everybody else, and it's important to the whole world.
Okay.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
No.
No? So 1 out of 3 so far have said no, it's not a Christmas movie. So everybody thinks...
Only 1 out of 3?
You're the only one.
I'm the first one?
You're the first one that says no, it's not a Christmas movie.
I just think it happened to be the time that they filmed it. That's it, right?
So tell us a little bit, I want to go back to your childhood a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about, what was the first instrument you picked up as a kid? How old were you, if you remember?
I started on clarinet. My grandfather, who was very close to me and my brother, was a classically trained violinist from, he went to the Vienna Conservatory of Music.
Oh, wow.
And he was really a concert level player. And he lived with us for a long time as we were growing up. And he taught my brother and I. He actually shared a bedroom with my brother and I, and he called it the bachelor quarters.
Wow.
And, you know, he fell on some hard times and where his eyesight got very, very bad. He couldn't even see the music anymore, but he could still play to bring tears to your eyes.
Wow.
And so when I was about 8, he bought me a clarinet. And that's what got me started, you know.
Did you argue with it at all and say, hey, I'd rather have a drum set or a guitar? Or
no.
Clarinet, you fell in love with it?
I didn't know, it was, I loved it. I loved getting the attention from him.
That's awesome.
And he started me learning on, you know, some of these old classic pieces that you play, Barcarolle and Angel Serenade and things like that.
Was it really difficult to learn as a kid at 8 years old? Or?
Well, whenever you start on a reed instrument as a kid, there's a lot of squeaking going on, you know, and everybody jokes about it. Your parents are going, oh my God, you know, instead of wanting you to practice, say, hey, why don't you take a break until you finally get it together and you're not squeaking anymore.
So, you know, a lot of people, they buy their kids a drum set. You know, back in those days, Mark said it, you know.
Yeah.
Back in those days, you went to Woolworths and you got a drum set.
Yeah, that would be tough. A parent with a drummer for a kid. Oh,
right.
Goodness. Yeah.
So at 8 years old, did you immediately started loving that instrument?
Yeah.
Start getting there? Now, did you take band up in school?
I was probably too young for that. I remember the first time I performed the clarinet was in elementary school. And it was one of those plays, and we must have been in, I don't know, 4th grade, maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere around there. And I got a feature piece to play a song in the play
Wow.
on the clarinet, and I never would remember what it was.
So going from the clarinet, what was the next instrument you picked up?
After that, when I started playing in groups, I realized that the clarinet wasn't quite going to cut it in a rock band.
Okay.
The old licorice stick, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got my first saxophone after junior high, I think it was. And then I started, picking up saxophone tunes and learning to play that. And it's much more conducive to rock music and being in a band.
Who was an influence with the saxophone for you?
Well, in the beginning, Dave Clark Five, they were one of the rock bands with a sax player. And so there was those songs, but I didn't really start taking it seriously until I probably hit about 20 years old.
Wow.
And that's when I really started to listen to the greats. And
do you remember who the first person was you sat down in a room besides Dave Clark Five? Do you remember anybody else in your mind you said, man, I really want to learn this tune?
Definitely Dave Sanborn.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's Get the Show on the Road was like a life changer. Hearing it going, wow, I want to do that. That was incredible. I mean, it's a great solo.
Yeah.
And Dave Sanborn, of course, is world renowned. He was one of my early heroes. A lot of the sax players that started. He was one of the innovators of the contemporary jazz scene. Him and guys like Grover Washington Jr. Before there was smooth jazz, there was those guys. And it was really good music. And I'd buy the records, put the needle on the turntable, and start. You'd have to keep going back. How did he do that? And that was the beginning. And then I got into a band where they wanted to start. It was a gig where we were just playing to make money, kind of a lounge circuit.
Yeah.
And we started doing things like Bob James and Grover Washington Jr., more Sanborn, Gino Vanelli. There was a lot of sax featured in that. So I was cutting my teeth on those tunes also.
So back then, I asked Eric and I asked Mark this. As kids, we all want to, you live the rock and roll. You see Aerosmith and Zeppelin and all these guys as kids, and women are running the stages and things. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll back in the 70s. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
Did you have that mentality getting into music? Like, man, I can't wait I'm going to get all these chicks and I'm going to do this. And did you have that at all, or you just focused on?
Well, that was a side benefit for sure.
Yeah.
Whenever you're in a band, you get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And that was kind of fun too. But I realized pretty quickly that I was really taking music seriously.
So you knew that you wanted to be a musician at that point.
Yeah, I did.
That's awesome. So who was so Eric and Mark, for some reason, they were on the same page. I asked them, I said, who was your favorite bands growing up for rock and roll? They both said the Beatles.
Yeah, well, it started, I'm a little older than them, so it started with my oldest sister, Carol's records, and she had things like the Champs, things like that, or, maybe the surf bands and things like that, and I was listening to those records, and then I remember the Duke of Earl, Gene Chandler. I said, wow, this is pretty cool, and these were guys that were just a little bit pre-Beatles. And when the Beatles, I guess they really started to break into America in 60, 61 and stuff like that, that was another life changer. I remember the first time I heard I Want to Hold Your Hand on my dad's shortwave radio. And it wasn't even on commercial radio yet. And I said, oh my God, what was that?
Wow.
I mean, these guys had such a unique sound. They got these Everly Brothers kind of harmonies.
Yeah.
But they were really rocking, and the vocal blend just totally amazed me, and I just spent hours just turning the dial trying to find that song again.
Wow.
Because I don't know where the broadcast was from. It could have been England, it could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
And then not long after that, it caught on, and I loved the Beatles. I loved the early records, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour. I loved that stuff. But at the same time, being very classically influenced from my grandfather, I loved these bands like Procol Harum that were, I think, one of the very first progressive bands that, integrated grand piano, Hammond organ, and they wrote pop songs, but they were totally classically influenced.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I literally learned I cut my teeth, my piano playing teeth on Procol Harum records.
Wow.
Just
wow.
love the band to this day.
Did you teach yourself how to play piano? Or
Totally self-taught.
Wow.
Never had a lesson for that. And it was just basically sitting at the piano, listening to records and learning. And my brother was he was a very schooled piano player.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from him. You know, Kenny, how do you play this chord or something like that? Or how do you do this scale to make the fingers? You know, and I learned a lot from him too, but a lot of it was just hard work and good ears.
You know, that's the biggest thing that we hear today from kids. They don't want to sit and be patient and learn.
Yeah.
You know, from especially the ear part of it. If you could give any kids out there advice today on to learn these instruments, what would it be?
Well, kids today, they play technology.
Big time.
That's what they do. I mean, and some of them are really talented at it, and they can do amazing things with computers. But I think it's kind of sad that you don't see a lot of kids just gravitating to acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of that. But did I answer your question?
Yeah, you pretty much answered.
All right.
So kids today, when I was asking Mark and Eric the same thing, kids today are losing that influence. It's not there anymore. And I don't want to use bands' names out there, but it's changing. The whole genre is changing a little bit compared to where you guys were at with rock and roll. You don't hear rock and roll anymore. Just the veterans like you guys that come out and do that. So kids today, I'd like to see, personally me, I'd like to see them get more into the rock and roll type thing because everybody, like you just said, sits at a computer and Pro Tools is the answer to everything.
Yeah, and also in computer-generated music anymore, there's so much artificial intelligence available nowadays. You can, I mean, you don't even have to write. You can hit a key on a keyboard and you get a whole production out of just one note.
That's absolutely crazy.
It's unbelievable. Beat generators and chord generators. And you see it even on social media anymore, guys. Hey, watch me write a song, and they start pushing buttons. And there's some people, if they have a good ear, they can come up with something kind of clever. But for the most part, I just really miss, acoustic instruments, analog music, moving air,
right,
an instrument. You know,
going back to that with your past. So let's talk about some of the bands you were in the past before we get into the Resonators and everything.
I probably should explain right before that. After the Procol Harum thing, I was, once again, I don't want to keep bringing up the classical influence, but
that's fine though.
I grew up in a house of classical music playing 24/7, and so I immediately got into prog music. And in my earlier bands, after Deep Purple, it was King Crimson.
Wow.
It was Procol Harum, it was Genesis, it was Mahavishnu Orchestra, Brian Auger. I loved the progressive stuff because they made you push the envelope and really, if you wanted to play that, you had to work and do the best that you could. And I'm not saying I ever achieved any of that, but I just loved
you're considered in that category. You're that good. And you guys will never admit it, but us fans that sit back and listen to you guys, and perfect example is Genesis. You guys are just as talented. I mean, you guys really are.
Just love that stuff from a compositional standpoint, and I love the mix of rock and classical. Yeah. And that's what those guys did.
And you guys like us that are older in our generation, we'll never hear another band write like Genesis did.
Yeah.
Peter Gabriel and all those guys. We'll never see that in our lifetime ever again. But it's missed. It's missed. And being forced to listen to what you listen to now is just sad.
Yeah, there's still a handful of groups that are pushing forward with things like that, like Porcupine Tree, and Pink Floyd is another one that I left out. They really were pushing the envelope back then. But it's a hard road. It is, compared to a very commercial or an indie band that's getting a lot of success and airplay. It's being in a progressive band, it's a hard road to travel. And
could you think of a harder business to be in than music?
No, I'd be hard pressed to.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's a lot of who you know type thing. But
I think all of us getting into it, we know the risk.
You
hear it from your parents all the time. You got to have something to fall back on. Well, I've done that a few times in my life too. But, you know the risk, but if it's something that you are, not that you do,
So do you ever just come out here at night and just sit and relax and pick the sax up and just start playing?
Yeah, well, I can't. The sax can get pretty loud in this house. It really just travels everywhere.
Wow.
And so if Lori's sleeping, no, I'll work quietly with headphones on in the studio.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But I can get a lot of playing done in the daytime. I like to have them down here every once in a while because it's fun playing in this room. It sounds amazing. The acoustics are just.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, in fact, when we got the piano, before they delivered it, we had the hardwood floor put in because it just rings in here. I like it.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
You know, I have somebody in my household that plays the flute, and she's in an orchestra now.
Right.
And every single night, I have to hear her practicing her flute.
Yeah.
And I don't know what a good sound is, what a bad sound is. I'm still trying to learn how to play guitar.
Okay.
You know, so every night I gotta hear this. But I think I'm gonna sneak you over one night and just when she's playing, if you could just tell me she's in tune or not, because to me it don't sound right. All of them years in band camp has not paid off.
Yeah, I spent quite a few years on the flute. And
did you really?
Especially throughout the '80s. You know, being in a cover band and playing a lot of Jethro Tull and all of that stuff. I was in a band called Link, and the one guy and myself, we used to actually put on these old homeless aqualung type of outfits.
Did you really?
And we did like a little medley, and I'd be out there with the flute, and it was, yeah.
How hard was his music to learn?
Not real hard. He's got a very distinctive style and tone in the way he plays. It's not technically really hard, but he is a very good player.
Yeah.
That's funny when, you mention the word flute, right away what comes to mind is Ian Anderson.
Right off, to everybody, honestly.
Yeah.
And you watch him, like I was watching a couple of videos of him a couple of weeks ago, and his breathing, and you call it technique, and I'm like, how's the guy's...
He would actually sort of blow air and sing into the mouthpiece when he sang, so you would get a combination of his voice and the flute and the air at the same time, and that was his signature sound. I think it was very cool.
It's definitely it's unique, honestly, because unless you sit, and I hope everybody at home that's watching this takes the time to go watch what we're talking about. If you really pay attention to him, to me, because like you said, it's a technique. To me, he's like breathing real heavy into the flute, and I'm thinking I'm gonna hyperventilate and pass out.
You would make those sounds,
yeah,
all of that stuff.
So is that just him the way he plays, or is that his?
Yeah, that's definitely his style.
Wow.
I can't think of anyone coming to mind right now that I've heard that does that, and that would be taboo in classical music.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
If there is something, I never heard of it before.
So you did a couple cover bands.
Plenty.
Back in the '80s, did this start?
Yeah. Well, actually, let's just to hit a few of them. Around 1970, in '69, I was in a band called Rap Rascal.
Okay.
It was a hard rock band, and we had a Hammond player that had a B3 and 3 tall boy Leslies. We lugged all that crap around for a while, but I left the band after a while and joined a band. We formed a band called Tyrant with one of my very best friends. I go all the way back to when we were teenagers. He's an amazing guitarist, and along with him and a guy named Pogo, Eddie Pagachnik, and Rod McKay and Billy Ernest, we had a 5-piece, and we were a prog band in every sense of the word. We developed quite a good following for 2 or 3 years. We played all of those bands that I mentioned to you before.
Was that around this area?
Yeah, it was in Cleveland area. Our organ player, Billy Ernest, he was like a virtuoso. 16 years old, he was playing stuff that would just blow people's mind.
Wow.
And he was just quite incredible, and people knew him as a great organist. He would do stuff. We would do a whole side of an Emerson, Lake and Palmer album, and he wouldn't even break a sweat.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and he would do. He would hear something by Herbie Hancock or anybody, and he would just pick it up and play it.
Wow.
He was that good. And so the band Tyrant, we were very cool. After Tyrant, we kind of gave it our best shot, and we broke up, and I started a band with my brother, Ken, who was a really great pianist, and we did a 4-piece prog band, all original music. We wrote everything.
Wow.
No covers. And I played mellotron, synthesizer, flute, and sax, and I was the lead singer.
Wow.
And I was the lead singer on Tyrant also. And then we had a really great singing bass player, Dave Ernie, who was well known around here for playing in the Monks and Sheffield Rush.
Wow.
And a drummer named Mark Frazier. And my brother Ken and I were a 4-piece, no guitar. So it was a very, very cool band. We gave it everything we had. We wrote some amazing music, but it was so hard to get work because people wanted to hear cover music.
Yeah.
So hard to get work.
How hard is it to write a song?
It's both difficult and hard. You know, some of the really good ones just come to you like that.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, sometimes you just have to work really, really hard on what you're trying to achieve and hear in a song. And it can take, you know, days, weeks, months. You never know.
Yeah, you always hear like Steven Tyler said, yeah, we had a hit. You know, we wrote it in the studio within a couple hours, but then he tells you, well, it took us 6 months to get to those couple hours.
Yeah.
We started that song 6 months ago.
That's true. A lot of us, I mean, Michael would have pieces that I would play on for him years ago, and he didn't use them on an album. And then all of a sudden he would call me and say, hey, I went back and revisited this tune you did. It sounded really great, and it really fits the theme of this next album, so I'm putting these on years later. And as far as writing stuff myself, yeah, I have stuff, just snippets that I have recorded either on tape or in the computer that were years ago.
Wow.
And all of a sudden I remember it and I listen to it, and then something happens. You know, so it's exciting.
From going to when you were doing your cover bands, how did you move into the 80s doing that stuff with the music change? You know, people will never understand. You were hard rocking in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then you had 2 years of disco. I hate to even use that word, but you had disco, and then went back into rock again.
Yeah, it happened around 1979 or 80. I had done some demos at the studio or with just a group of guys in Cleveland, and I sent them to Our Gang, which was an independent record label, Bobby and Joey Perello in Cleveland.
Okay.
And they really liked what I did, and at the time they were handling Link. And Link was looking for a new singer, multi-instrumentalist, and the Perellos played my demo for those guys, and they loved it, and they called me. And I joined the band, and I spent from probably 79 to 86, 87, something like that, in Link, which was a Warren Youngstown band, but we played the whole Cleveland circuit.
Wow.
And we worked our butts off. We were very prolific writers. And we worked on original music as much, if not more, than we did covers. But we did the covers. We did the Who. We did the Cars. We did all kinds of whatever was popular at the time.
Yeah.
But we always worked in original music. And we did 3 albums over the space of 7 years. Their first original album was before I had joined, but we did play some of it together. It was called All For You. The second one was with me. I wrote a lot of the album. It was more of an EP, 6 songs. And that one was called Temptation. And then there was a third one unreleased that is complete called Maximum Air.
Wow.
And not only those, I have a closet full of tape of I bet I have 50 songs that never saw the light of day.
That are done.
That are linked. And something's going to happen with those one of these days. I'm going to get to it when I have the time, but I'm going to get those
Do you know
up.
how cool that would be, though, for people to hear something from that?
I think it would be very cool, very fun. And I just get so much joy, people coming up to me years later saying, I remember you from Tyrant. You guys were amazing. I remember you on Link. And that just warms the heart. You know, it's very fun.
70s and 80s. In the 70s, what was your favorite venue to play at?
In the 70s?
Yeah, your favorite venue, and then we'll talk about the 80s.
Probably the Agora. Yeah, we played the Agora, but there was also, the early 70s was the Cyrus Erie and the Hullabaloos, which we played the whole circuit. And that turned into the North Ridgeville Hullabaloo, which turned into Spanky's.
Wow.
And
I remember Spanky's,
yeah, Spanky's was a fun gig to play. But any place that had a good-sized stage, we always had our own lights in PA. Okay. In Link, it was ridiculous. We were playing local bars. We had a 3-man road crew, 55 lights, an enormous PA, a 24-foot truck, diesel truck, and the guys in the band. And, you know what? After you'd get paid and everything was taken care of. We were playing for peanuts.
Yeah,
it was just for getting out there and getting your name known, trying to get airplay and getting your music recognized.
So, what do you think in the '80s was your favorite venue? If you had to guess.
Wow. Geez, I don't know. There was a lot of them in Warren, Youngstown, because the band was out. All the guys were from there except me. But there was God, I can't even remember. Bonnie and Clyde's was one of them.
Wow.
There was 2 or 3 other ones that were pretty big venue. Honestly, I can't remember the names right now.
You know, in the Cleveland area back in the '80s, I mean, Cleveland always been a happening area. People don't realize how popular Cleveland was for the music business.
Right.
You know, everybody back in those days was like, we got to get to Hollywood. We got to get. And Cleveland was honestly, of all the bands that we had, it was great to have our local bands.
Then the beginning of the end was the change of the drinking laws. And all of a sudden, people that were 18 could not come to the bars anymore. It was 21 and over. And the attendance went down 2/3. It just went from 800 or 1,000 people to 200 or 300 people.
And it was huge. My parents owned a bar in the Flats, diagonal from Fagan. And when the drinking law changed, I remember my parents really upset that they had no say in this whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it really hurt their business. I mean, it really did a lot of damage to every business down there, but it really changed, like you said. If you remember Riverfest down in the Flats.
Oh, sure.
You know,
it was a blast.
It was everybody looked forward to going to the Flats on the weekends. And of course, you know, you have your idiots that fall into the river and all that stuff when they're drinking too much, but that was the place to be.
I remember the old Flats, you know, which were, they were so cool. They were kind of dangerous. They had this dark kind of, I think what comes to mind is like Liverpool. It was just like.
It really was.
Yeah, there was stripper bars, there was old shot in the beer bars, and there was these bars that you played. But I played a lot of them. I loved the old Deepoo's Tool and Die, which was a very, very cool place. Late 60s, early 70s, 5 sets a night. But then, moving in, you know.
5 sets a
80s.
night for how much?
Oh, geez. Gosh, I can't remember. A couple, $300 maybe. You know, for the whole band.
Yeah, I mean, that was great money back then.
In the early days, But back in the Hullabaloo days, it was more like 175, 200.
Was it really?
Yeah, we'd get our macaroni and cheese from that. So, you know.
So moving into bands like Boku, and that, how did that even come about?
Okay, let me kind of step back again.
Absolutely.
Because after that, I would be remiss not to think of the Dinosaurs, which was a very, very cool band, and that's when I met Tommy Dobeck. Starting around '87, I left Link. I joined. I was playing in a band called The Motion, which was a Motown band.
Okay.
With Daniel Pecchio and John Safara from the Glass Heart was in the band, and it was a big band with a whole horn section. I was playing keyboards in the band. We had a couple of guy singers, a girl singer. It was I don't know, 12-piece, 13-piece, whatever. And it was a Motown band, and they lured me into joining the band after all those years with Link because I was just so tired of being broke.
Right.
And they were making pretty good money at the time, you know, kind of yuppie gigs and things like that. So I joined the band, and it was very short-lived. I was maybe 6 months, and I wasn't really happy doing it. The gig, I think I caught on them in the tail end of the band, and it was starting to go down as far as the gigs and the financial reasons to play with them. And Pecchio came up to me and he goes, you know, I'm leaving the band and I'm starting a band with Tommy Dobeck. We're going to do a classic rock thing. You want to join? I said, let me think about it. I'm in. And that's how long it took me. And we started the Dinosaurs, and then there was us 3, and we got Cy Sulek on guitar, a Cleveland legend, and a piano player and singer named John Solomon. And we had a killer time. We had a great time. We played all the clubs around. We had a great following. We also had a great following in Florida. We'd go down to Florida for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
We'd play like 2 weeks at Delray Beach, 2 weeks at Captiva Island, then go down to Key West and play a couple of weeks and come home.
That's amazing.
And it was before we had any responsibilities.
Right.
And it was profitable to do it at the time because every venue that you played, they gave you room and board.
Wow.
There was always a band house. Nowadays, it's very seldom you see that. So you go down there and play, but all your expenses are, you know, you have all these extra expenses of food and a room and all that. almost not worth it to go.
Wow.
And we had a really nice run. And after that, I started a duo with Scott Allen, very well-known musician in the area, great bass player and guitarist. He played with Humble Pie, played with Donnie Iris, the Pony Express, and we enjoyed doing the duo for quite a while. And then we kind of got to a point where we realized that we'd actually make a little more money if we did solos, and that's when I started playing solo gigs. So,
did you have any involvement with Humble Pie at all? Or anything?
No,
just
I didn't. No,
okay.
Scott did.
Okay.
And what was happening was when we were doing our duo, he'd get called to do a Humble Pie gig occasionally, or he'd get called to do a Donnie Iris gig once in a while, or Pony Express. And if we had something booked, that became a priority. So I was kind of stuck without work. That's when I started working on doing the solo.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was simply, a financial decision. We are still great friends, and
that's awesome.
And we still play together a couple times a year. And he's out there. He's busy. Scott in show business. He's the island doctor, in case you've seen him on Facebook. That's Scott.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he's the island doctor. Just checking.
I never knew that.
He is a driven, hard worker.
Have you got a chance, speaking of islands, did you get a chance to go over there to the islands at all in the last couple of years and watch any of that?
I haven't.
I mean, those seem like the places for music now, like Put-in-Bay and Kelly's Island.
We play there a lot in the Dinosaurs. We play over at the Boathouse.
That's awesome.
Or the, what's that called? The Roundhouse. Is that the Roundhouse?
I think
Is that what it's called?
Roundhouse.
Okay. And we play solos there once in a while too, but it got to the point where it was so young that a lot of the young bands and entertainers, they would go there and play for almost peanuts just to go and party.
Yeah.
And all those of us that were trying to earn a living was like, no, we're not going to play for that. So, that was the end of that.
So how do you go from your cover bands in the 80s to getting involved with Boku and all those guys? I mean, how did that even come about?
Well, I got the call from Tommy, because we had worked together in the Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
He said, Michael's going to do some Michael Stanley and Friends gigs.
Okay.
And this was before the Resonators. And he goes, you'd be interested in playing sax for that? And I said, oh yeah, most definitely I would. Wow. And this would have been around 90, I guess, 90, 91, something like that. And there was a summer, there was like 4 fairs booked. And that was my first experience playing with Michael. And I thank Tommy for bringing me into that. And
that's a huge introduction, as a musician, knowing what Michael was doing back in those days. I mean, for a musician, you got to be going, wow, and just got.
Well, after playing with Tommy for a 3 years, he knew I was totally capable of doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got a call from Michael. He goes, "Are you interested in doing this?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I am." So Scott Allen, who I talked about before, he played bass in those shows, and I played sax in those shows. And it was one summer, 4 shows that we did. And they were a great, great time, big crowds, and then that came to an end that summer, and there was no more gigs for a while, and until I got the call to join the band in '98.
So on the Michael Stanley and Friends that you did, you said you did 4? There were 4 of them?
Yeah, that summer.
Do you remember who was in the band at that time?
Oh, geez. Well, of course, Tommy. I think Jonah did them. Scott, me, Michael. Kevin Raleigh did 1 or 2, and Bob Palander did 1 or 2.
Wow.
But it was the core of the band.
Yeah, yeah.
And with a couple of different guests here and there. I don't recall Jennifer doing those. I might be wrong, but I don't remember. And yeah, that's all I remember of that. And then I went back to doing solos, and then in '98, prior to '98, Michael was doing some Michael Stanley and Friends with Ed Kaner on violin.
Okay.
And that went very well for him. He loved Ed's talent, obviously. Ed is just wonderful. Great human being and player.
Well, you and Ed together, too. I mean,
yeah,
you guys,
that was fun. And then he went back to doing some of the old stuff, and that's when he brought me back in on sax. And since '98, I spent 23 years with him.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Being involved with Michael Stanley, and Tommy asking you, back in those days, Michael Stanley was Cleveland's, he was the son, everybody. Mm-hmm. And to be a part of that, was there any times on stage you would go, man, I can't believe I'm up here playing?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Have you seen loyal fans like that before? I mean, like, the most loyal fans that you can see here.
No, I
in the
never
Midwest.
saw anything like that before or since. I probably never will. I mean, he, in every sense of the word, is Cleveland's favorite son. And playing those shows, it was amazing because we would see people our age, we'd see their kids, and we'd see their kids' kids. There would be grandkids out there singing the words of the song. I could see we'd be playing Midwest Midnight, and the kids would be singing the damn song. And it was so cool. It was so cool, you know.
What would be your favorite song to do, Michael Stanley song to do?
Always the first one that I really gotten interested in was Show on the Road. And that would still be the same. It would be the one. Not only that sax was featured, but it's the one that really got me started in the love for the saxophone and Dave Sanborn and what he did with Michael. And definitely that one.
Do you guys have a song, like, is there a song that you go, oh, here we go again, or anything? I guess what I mean is, when this song starts to play, do you get goosebumps? Besides that song, do you get goosebumps and go, man, I really love this song?
Yeah, Lover. I love Lover.
Do you really?
Yeah.
So, all the years being with Michael and doing the traveling with him, what would be one of the shows that stick out to you? One of your favorite shows you've ever done with him?
We played at the St. Louis Amphitheater.
You know, everybody talks about that show.
Yeah, and we played. It was like Blossom on steroids. This place was so big, and I have a couple pictures that I took from the stage from my perch, just because I could not believe the size. It was a great show. We were opening up for Don Felder.
Okay.
REO Speedwagon and Styx. So there was an incredibly huge crowd. It was like people as far as you could see. And I never got to play Blossom with Michael. So that was sort of like my Blossom. And he had a very good following in St. Louis because this radio station that had us come and play was one of the first that supported him and his music. Wow. And he got significant airplay. I think the station was KSHE or something, Cash, they called it. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. But it was a really, really fun gig.
What was your first impression of meeting Michael? Like the first time you actually met him face to face, talking to him?
It was great. He was very cool, very laid back, really easy to talk to. And man, stories, that guy had the best freaking stories. The best stories ever, yeah. But I felt he made... the first time I was nervous, the first song that I played on, I think it was Any Other Fool was the first song. Funny story about that. I was real nervous, even though he was trying to make me feel relaxed and stuff like that. Yeah. And I was going to record with him. And so I started playing it. I put my horn together really, really fast. And I started playing the tune. And I'm going, God, this is in the weirdest key for saxophone. I mean, the fingering was so strange. And to make a long story short, I finished the whole song kind of playing it in the wrong key. Not that it sounded like it was in the wrong key. What it was I had my mouthpiece on the wrong spot on the cork. So it was a half step off. And I was trying to bend the notes to make it fit the melody. And if I would have just pushed it in a little bit further, it would have been a piece of cake. But I laughed about that later on. I said, because I couldn't figure out what I did wrong until like a couple of days later. I said, I'm going to figure out what's going on. I took it home and I put it back on. And I started playing it in the right key, but with the mouthpiece in the right spot. And it was real easy. Wow. So that was weird. I never made that mistake again.
Is there a moment in the beginning that you remember Michael actually asking you to be into the band? Like, was there that moment, hey, would you like to be a Resonator with us?
It was a phone call. And, he said, he basically, like I said, he was this very cool, relaxed guy. And he said, would you like to, be in the band and do some gigs with us? And I did, and I was hoping that it would last. Well, after the first couple of gigs, it went very well, and I never looked back. It was just like, hey, I'm in the band.
It's crazy that people get into bands, and you've been in industry as long as you have. You don't see the familyness and to get, everybody clicking and getting along. It's broke up a lot of bands.
Yeah.
You know a lot of bands that have made it to the top and they broke up because of egos. Was there any of that in this band at all? Did you see any of that? Or
No, not really. You know, when you started working with Michael, you learned really quickly what he was looking for in a musician, what he wanted. And being familiar with his music, you just, you know, I got to the point where I started playing solos for him in the earlier albums, and it was like hard because I would do 20 takes maybe, at least.
Yeah.
And he would say, well, I like this part and I like this part. I'm not crazy about what you're doing here. And you'd rethink it. After a while, you knew what he wanted, and I could just go right for it. Go right to it. He didn't want jazzy stuff. He didn't want fast stuff. He wanted soul. He wanted melody.
And you delivered that.
And he wanted feel. And after you know, and it was like that with everybody. Everybody knew their role, and Michael was the glue. He was the leader, and it's something that we really miss now because he held everything together like a glue. Yeah. And if when you were together with him, if you screwed up or did something that he would let you know, and no uncertain terms. He goes, "Hey, don't do that." Or,
wow.
I can remember just one example of probably many when after we were playing Lover for so many years, I started wandering away from the original feel of the song. The show, he said, "You were doing stuff kind of like different from like the original." I said, "Yeah, I think I, elaborated a little." And he goes, "Go back to the original."
Wow.
He goes, "Don't change it, just play what was there." And so I did. I was happy to do that.
Do you ever notice the fans out in the audience? Do you ever notice them, or because of the house lights, you really can't pay attention? Like when you get done with one of your solos at one of the shows, people have tears in their eyes. They have goosebumps.
Sometimes, after the first couple, 3 rows, they're getting the light off the stage, and you can kind of see faces. But as you get, into a little deeper into the room, you start to lose the faces. But a lot of times you can identify them. Sometimes you don't see people. But what's really cool was in Lover, and the famous line, "Thank God for the man who put the white lines on the highway," and those house lights would come up, and you could see everybody, and it was really fun to look around and just see it. All those glowing faces and the smiling and the love for that.
Would you think a line would ever been that big?
It's amazing.
Musicians strive for that. Like they spend years trying to come up with that one line.
The ultimate hook.
Yeah, and he does it on accident,
Yeah.
But from the fan standpoint, and a lot of us fans will talk before the show and after the show, and it's always your solo moments that are the topics, because you really do give people goosebumps, and I see people with tears in their eyes, and
that's awesome.
That's the moment that true musicians, you guys strive for that. But watching and seeing everybody, and there's always a group of people with tears in their eyes, and they're wiping their eyes when you get done with your solo, because it's so powerful.
That makes me feel good. Thank you.
But you need to really know that from the fans, and they'll let you know, especially now, because we've all taken it for granted. We've all, with the pandemic and losing Michael and everything, we've all realized we've taken life for granted. So now we're all stepping back, and that's why these interviews are so important to see from your guys' standpoint. But you need to know that, every one of you band members, but you need to know that those solos definitely go unnoticed.
Awesome.
We notice those things, and you getting into it. And I hate to jump off subject, but I want to do this. Like, there's a part, and forgive me right now, but there's a part where you take the triangle and you ding it in Jennifer's ear to love somebody. And everybody in the crowd will stop, and they wait. They're just staring right at you, because they know what you're getting ready to do. So, so it's those moments that band just gels so much. And I've said this, and some people take this personal, and I don't mean to cause grief, but I'm a resonator. I grew up on MSB, and I went to a lot of shows. But us fans, we see so much chemistry with you resonators. You guys are up there having fun. Even when you make mistakes, we don't catch it. You guys catch it because you're professional musicians. And sometimes you would see you guys know it.
Yeah.
But the Resonators seem like they just click and gel so well.
There's a lot of good friendships in the band,
Yeah.
for sure. And especially, you know, Rodney and I go way back. Rodney, we go way back. I mean, in the 70s, I was in an all-original band, I forget, you didn't even mention this before, called The Jump. And it was with Phil Lombardo from the original James Gang.
Wow.
An incredible, he's one of my best friends still to this day. And Richard Shack, who spent time in the James Gang in the case of E.T. Hooley. Ron Beidel was the drummer from Wild Cherry.
Oh, wow.
Tom Zell was the bass player in some incredible Cleveland bands, and myself. We were another all-original band, and we were being handled by Belkins, just like Jonah was, and like Michael was back then. And I forgot where I was going with this.
You're talking about Rodney.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Rodney and I, with Phil Lombardo, Phil was an incredible writer, and whenever we went in the studio, it was always Phil, Rodney, and me doing the three-part harmonies.
Man.
And Rodney always had the real high ones, and I was in the middle, and Phil was on the bottom. And we did a lot of recording. You know, we always did we did a lot of recording in The Jump, and it was always us doing the harmony parts. And that's when I first got to know him. And he hasn't changed a bit since
He's
then.
hilarious. Yeah. Like I met him personally a couple months ago. You guys do the downtown Cleveland gigs, which are fantastic. And I got to hear Rodney talk, and he's a pretty funny guy. You know, you got, and he's quick. You got to be able to keep up with him, you know.
Well, if you go on a car ride with him for any length of time, you don't have to say a word. Just fasten your seatbelt, and he's going to talk the whole time.
He's one of my up and coming interviews.
Okay, we just drove down to Columbus, Ohio.
Did you?
Last month, you know, an hour and a half each way, where we went to visit Richard Shack, who's a mutual friend of ours, and he talked all the way there and all the way back.
Wow.
I'm just like, yeah.
Can you give me some advice interviewing Rodney? Give me one piece of advice while I'm interviewing him.
Oh my God, I don't even know. I don't even know. I won't go there.
Everybody just said I need to be prepared.
Yeah.
They said just throw the questions away. Let him just take over the interview. Come back in 2 hours. We'll have it done.
Wild man.
What with we were just talking about with the crowd and everybody and the Jennifer thing of you, has that familyness with all you guys coming together, and I'm jumping ahead, but I just need to do it. This upcoming show, you know, some of the band members ain't ready yet to be involved and things like that, but at this point, we all get it. We understand. You know, you lost somebody 6 months ago that is not only a staple to the band and to the community and the music industry. We forget how personal it really is that you would get a phone call from Michael or, you know, and those kind of things. So we completely get it and we understand. So in the long run, all those fun things that you did in the band, just bring that when you were at the next show. You know, those fun things that you guys did. And I know there's going to be a lot of tension on stage because of the way it's gone, but
it'll be different. I don't think anyone's going to expect any of us to sound like Michael.
Yeah.
That was his unique gift in his voice. But it will be a beautiful way to honor him and remember him, just to have different band members sing his songs and maybe tell a story or two.
Well, what I want to do is I'm going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back. We're going to get real personal coming up. And I'm looking forward to it. And
me too.
It's been great so far. I really appreciate it. We'll be right back with Paul Wolf.